All right, so we are up to day 192 of going through my old journal. And the quote for today says, if you don't sacrifice for what you want, then what you want becomes the sacrifice. It says, what is the biggest sacrifice you've ever made? What did it do for your life? So if you're following along, you might take a minute to pause and think about how you might respond to that. And I will read what I wrote. I don't know if you can hear that shooting outside. We have a, I think they're doing some military exercises or something, but just ignore that if you can hear it. Okay, so it says, what is the biggest sacrifice you ever made? What did it do for your life? Okay, I said, thankfully, I don't feel like I've ever had to make any major sacrifices. And I would agree with that. I said, or at least nothing I've done really feels like much of a sacrifice. I said, to some people, maybe going no contact with both of my parents could be seen as a sacrifice, but I don't really see it that way. I've made the choice on my own to cut communication, and it has only helped my life. Plus, I didn't communicate with them much before, so it wasn't really a major change. And one thing I think is interesting about that is there's a lot of talk, or I've come across a lot of content lately about people like cutting ties with their parents. And I came to this like years ago. Like it's been over a decade now that I went no contact with my dad, and then with my mom it's more recently, but I guess it's been a couple of years at this point. And now I'm seeing more people talk about it, and I wonder like if I would have been exposed to this content before. Like, I'm kind of glad that I came around to the decision on my own without, being, what am I trying to say? Being influenced by other people. Because a part of me, if I hadn't done it on my own, I may wonder like, well, did I make this decision because other people are doing it? Am I jumping on the bandwagon? But I know that's not the case because I did it before I really knew anyone else that had gone no contact with their parents. But now I feel better hearing that other people are doing this, because I'm like, okay, so it's not just me. I'm not the only one who's done this, if that makes sense. Like, I'm glad that I'm seeing content about it now because I feel like I'm not alone. But at the same time, like, if I had seen this content before I went no contact, I may be like wondering like, am I being influenced by these other people to do that? But I don't know. Anyway, I said, right now I feel like I'm sacrificing a lot of my time by putting it towards work instead of putting it towards other career goals. And I said, but up until recently, I really needed a decent paying job to pay my bills and put money towards my hobbies and interests. But now it's not quite as necessary. And I say that because I inherited some property, and so that kind of, I don't have to pay rent and stuff anymore. I still have like property taxes and utilities and things like that, but it has kind of like free up to my options to not really need a job that pays as much. I can think more about like, what do I like, and not feel like I have to have this job that's high paying just to be able to live and survive. And this was even before, like more recently, just within the past several months, I've been seeing a lot of people talk about how rents are just going crazy. And yeah, like I just feel like so fortunate to not have to be worrying about like paying rent and having to do that. Like, it's just crazy. And I feel so bad for the people that are like renting right now. Like, it's just crazy. But yeah, that's something that yeah, that I don't have to worry about right now, and I'm so like fortunate. Yeah, so I think there was a time that I was like, I'm not enjoying this job. I'm feeling really stressed out. And there was a lot of other factors like at play during that time. Like it's like during 2020 and 2021, like I don't know if I was having like an early midlife crisis of like trying to figure out what my life is, but I just knew that like things didn't feel right, and I'm like, what do I need to do? What can I change? And then I kind of felt locked in my job though, but then like it was almost even worse like once I did move into this place and I didn't feel as locked into my job. I'm like, well, I'm not like locked into this job. I don't need it. I could get like a lower wage job that's not as like mentally taxing and not as stressful and still get by. But I'm glad I didn't do that at that time, because now we've got inflation and everything, and it is beneficial to have a little bit of a higher paying job. So anyway, so I said, I said, but I know I should keep going just to finish out and get my degree. I've mentioned that several times. And yeah, my like getting my PhD was one thing that like did keep me in the job. I think if I wasn't in the PhD program, I probably would have started transitioning out of this job. I wouldn't have just quit because I respect my boss too much to do that, but I would have like probably started to transition out of it and leave that job at some point. But I'm glad I stuck with it. I'm glad I'm getting my PhD. So I said, if I didn't have a plan and time frame to finish and escape, it would feel a lot worse. And I said, like it did last fall. So yeah, fall of 2021 was really hard because it was pretty early in my PhD and I just could not see an end to it. I didn't have like a vision of how I could possibly finish it. And I was on the verge of quitting, and I even told my boss, I'm like, this was really hard this semester, and you know, I'm gonna stick with it at least through the next semester, but like if things don't change, I just kind of gave her a heads up that like I was feeling like really stressed. But then it ended up working itself out, and I planned and scheduled, and okay, here's when I'm gonna finish and here's what I'm gonna do. And so I kind of got out of that feeling. I said, but I'm starting to see the end, and that helped. Like, and I'm definitely starting to see the end now. I'm taking my last class this semester, and I've already got part of my dissertation done. I've got like a fifth of my dissertation probably, I would say, finished right now. And so that I can see the finish line. I said, and things feel like they're starting to come together, so it doesn't feel like as much of a sacrifice anymore. So yeah, there was a time that I felt like the PhD was like more of a sacrifice to me than it was worth at that time. But I am glad that I kind of stuck it through. But I don't feel like that's really like a big sacrifice, because I would be benefiting at the end. So yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like I've ever made like a huge sacrifice. I mean, one part was really hard when I was early on in my PhD was my grandpa had passed away. And even before that, like I guess you could say I was sacrificing my time, because I was coming down every weekend to, because I lived about an hour away, and I was coming down every weekend to stay with my grandparents. It was probably a good 3 years or so, 2 or 3 years at least, that I was coming down quite a bit and just staying on the weekends and helping to take care of them and everything. But I don't feel like it was a sacrifice. I guess I never really felt like it was too much of a sacrifice, because I cared about my grandparents, and you know, they had spent so much of their time and energy helping to raise me that I didn't really feel like that was a sacrifice. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe if I would have, I've talked a lot about this before, that I've never really felt like, I've mentioned this so many times, I've never really felt like I've wanted to like get married and have kids. I feel like if I would have done that, that I would have felt like I would have sacrificed my future, you know, for my husband or for my kids. Like, especially if, you know, how a lot of women, you know, some women that's not really, like, they don't feel like they've sacrificed because they did, like, continue to work and continue to move up. And some women, they don't feel like it's a sacrifice. You know, they were able to continue their job or their education even while being married and having kids. And then other women, I don't think they feel like that's a sacrifice because what they want, because it says if you don't sacrifice for what you want becomes a sacrifice. So I think some women like do want kids and want the marriage and want that life. So for them, like getting married and having kids is not a sacrifice to them because that's what they want. But for me, that's never been what I've wanted. You know, even with like all of like culture and society telling you that that's what you're supposed to do, like even with all that, like I never wanted that. That was never where I saw myself. So I think if I would have done that, I would have felt like I would have sacrificed what I wanted to like have a family like that. But since I didn't do that, I don't feel like I've really sacrificed anything. I think I pretty much gone for what I wanted for the most part and just done it. So anyway, yeah, I think I brought up the thing about going no contact with my parents is because I feel like a lot of people feel like that would be like sacrificing my relationship with them. And when I first went no contact with my dad, I did get some pushback from some people, you know, saying like, well, he's your dad and you're supposed to honor your parents and things like that. But I never felt like that. I was just like, I didn't feel like he was that instrumental in like raising me or making me the person that I am. So I never really, even though people said that, the only reason I felt like I second guessed it was because other people, you know, made me kind of like second guess it because they were just like so, it was so wild to them that I would do that. But and even to some extent with my mom, I did get some pushback from a couple of people that thought that maybe that wasn't the right decision. But like for myself, I felt like the sacrifice would have been maintaining those relationships. Yeah, so I think I may have sacrificed for a little while to like keep maintaining those relationships. I think that was the sacrifice, and I think going no contact was the better decision, because otherwise I feel like I would be like maybe sacrificing some of my life to maintain a relationship with them. But anyway, that's what I have for that day. I will be back tomorrow with day 193.